He thought he was just pushing around another innocent shopper. But the moment this cop demanded ID, he had no clue he was about to get exposed by an undercover FBI agent. And the whole store watched it happen. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. Hey, what do you think you're doing here? Those words sliced through the hum of the grocery store like a knife. Shoppers froze. A mother pushing a stroller paused mid-aisle. An elderly man holding a carton of eggs stared wide-eyed over his glasses. Standing in front of the yogurt shelf was Marcus Taylor, mid-30s, calm demeanor, clean jeans, black jacket, a beige cap pulled low over his brow. He turned slowly, a single container of Greek yogurt still in his hand. His eyes landed on the source of the voice, a uniformed police officer, chest puffed out, hand resting just inches from his holstered gun. Marcus raised an eyebrow, his tone level but polite. "Is there a problem, officer?" Officer Daniel stepped closer, his boots squeaking on the polished floor. He was young, maybe late 20s, but wore his uniform like armor. He glanced at Marcus's shopping basket, then at Marcus, his eyes narrowing. "You can't loiter around here," Daniel snapped. "People complained. Said you've been standing here too long." A nearby shopper, a teenage girl holding a box of cereal, frowned. She knew what she was seeing. So did the older woman next to her. But no one moved. No one spoke up. Marcus felt the weight of the eyes on him, but kept his expression neutral. He'd seen this 100 times before. Men like Daniels, fresh on power, eager to remind everyone who was boss. "I'm not loitering," Marcus said evenly. He gestured with the yogurt. "Just deciding if I want vanilla or plain." "Didn't realize that was illegal." Daniels took another step, closing the space between them. His voice dropped to a low growl. "Don't get smart with me. Show me some ID." Marcus felt a familiar tightness coil in his chest, the part of him trained to stay calm when adrenaline begged him to act. If this were any other day, any other place, Daniels wouldn't know what hit him. But today, Marcus reminded himself, he was just Marcus Taylor, an ordinary man buying groceries after a long day at work. Slowly, he reached for his wallet. "You." "No, officer," Marcus said, his voice calm but carrying enough steel to make Daniel's eyes flicker. "This isn't exactly how you're supposed to approach someone doing nothing wrong." Daniel scoffed. "I'll decide what's wrong. Now hurry up." Marcus opened his wallet, but instead of pulling out his driver's license, his thumb brushed past a badge. A different badge. FBI. The letters gleamed faintly under the fluorescent lights. Daniel's eyes widened for a split second, then narrowed again. "You think that's funny? Flashing a toy badge?" Daniels hissed. Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He held the badge up so Daniels, and the dozen shoppers now pretending not to watch, could see. "Special Agent Marcus Taylor, FBI. And unless you want internal affairs crawling up your chain of command by morning, I suggest you take your hand off that holster and step back." Daniel's mouth opened. Closed. He glanced around, suddenly aware that every aisle now had someone staring. A man with a cell phone out. A woman whispering to her husband. Witnesses. Too many to control. I didn't know," Daniels stammered. "That much is obvious," Marcus said coolly. He slipped the badge back into his wallet and leaned in just enough for Daniels to hear the edge in his voice. "The people you're supposed to protect? They're watching. Remember that next time you decide to pull your badge on someone minding their own business." Daniels stepped back as if burned. He cleared his throat, trying to salvage what was left of his authority. I was just doing my job." Marcus placed the yogurt in his basket, his eyes locked on Daniels. "Do it better." Without another word, Marcus turned and walked toward the checkout. Head high, steps steady. The people parted for him, some nodding, others whispering. Daniels stood frozen in front of the dairy case, the weight of his mistakes settling on his shoulders heavier. Then his badged at the register, the teenage girl who'd watched it all gave Marcus a shy smile as she bagged his groceries. "Thank you, sir," she murmured. Marcus paused. He knew what she meant. He gave her a small, reassuring nod. "Take care of yourself," he said softly, then pushed his cart out into the summer night. Just another man with a bag of groceries. But a man who'd reminded everyone that sometimes power only works when good people stay silent. And today, he'd refused to be silent. Officer Daniels was new in town, fresh from a big city transfer where his record was spotless, but his attitude was already getting whispered about in break rooms and behind squad car doors. He liked to puff out his chest, speak just a little too loud, and remind anyone who'd listen that his badge gave him the final say. And Marcus, a lone black man in an upscale neighborhood grocery store, was exactly the kind of person Daniels loved to corner when he felt the itch for control. "Show me your ID," Daniels barked, his voice echoing down the refrigerated aisle. Heads turned. A mother by the milk section froze, pulling her two kids closer and whispering for them to stay quiet. An older man near the orange juice shifted position, phone angled just enough to catch everything on video while he pretended to scroll through. The weather. Marcus raised an eyebrow, unfazed. He'd handled harder men in darker places than this smug, small-town cop could ever imagine. But he also knew how dangerous an ego in uniform could be, especially with an audience. "Is there a problem, officer?" Marcus asked calmly, keeping his tone even, respectful, but not submissive. Daniels folded his arms, one thumb hooked near his holster like a promise. He made a show of glancing at Marcus's cart: a half-gallon of milk, some Greek yogurt, a loaf of whole grain bread, eggs. Nothing but groceries. Yet Daniels made a face like he'd just sniffed contraband. "I saw you looking around like you're up to something," Daniels said, louder this time. His voice dripped with mock suspicion. "Mind if I check that bag?" He gestured to Marcus's reusable shopping bag tucked under his arm. Marcus let out a soft sigh and set the bag in his cart. "It's empty. I just brought it so I don't have to use plastic." Daniels leaned closer, close enough that Marcus could smell stale coffee on his breath. "Don't get smart with me. People like you think you can hide things. Empty your pockets." Now, Marcus felt the weight of the moment pressing in. The eyes of the shoppers, the phone starting to lift a little higher, the hush that fell. Like fog when people knew trouble was brewing but weren't sure if they'd step in. "Officer," Marcus said, his voice still calm but edged with a warning that only a trained ear would catch. "I'm not going to empty my pockets in the middle of a grocery store for no reason. If you have a lawful suspicion I'm committing a crime, say so. Otherwise, I'm going to finish my shopping." Daniels' jaw twitched. He wasn't used to being told no. He especially wasn't used to being told no by someone who didn't look like they should dare. He took another step in. "Do I look like I'm joking? You think you're going to make a fool out of me in front of all these people?" A teenage employee stocking the yogurt nearby dropped a container. The crack of plastic hitting tile was like a gunshot in the silence. Marcus stayed perfectly still, shoulders squared, eyes locked on Daniels. He knew that if he reached for his wallet the wrong way, Daniels would see what he wanted to see. A threat where there was none. So Marcus spoke low, just loud enough for Daniels. And the phone's now definitely recording, to catch every word. "You're new in town, right?" Marcus asked. Daniels flinched, thrown off by the question. "I know you transferred from the city. I know you've got a badge and a chip on your shoulder. But here's what you don't know. I'm not some kid you can shove around to make yourself feel big." Daniels' eyes narrowed. "You think you're special?" Marcus didn't blink. He reached slowly, so slowly, into his jacket pocket. The mother with the kids covered her son's eyes. The older man by the orange juice held his breath. Out came a slim leather wallet, but inside wasn't just a driver's license. Marcus flipped it open with a practiced flick. The gold letters caught the harsh store lights. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Daniels recoiled like he'd touched a live wire. His mouth opened, then snapped shut. He looked around, saw the cameras, the witnesses, the teenager wide-eyed behind the yogurt shelf. "You ran the wrong play today, Officer Daniels," Marcus said quietly, tucking the badge away like it was just another credit card. "Now you've got a store full of people who know exactly who you are and who I am." Daniels' throat bobbed. He took a step back, then two. I didn't know." "That's your problem," Marcus cut in, voice sharp enough to slice through the frozen aisle. "You didn't care to know. Now get out of my way. And if you think about following me to my car, you better call your supervisor first." Daniel stood there, cheeks flushed, fists clenched uselessly at his sides. Marcus turned his back on him without another word. The ultimate insult to a bully used to fear and forced respect. The shoppers slowly returned to their carts and shelves, but the older man's phone stayed pointed until Marcus disappeared down the next aisle. Somewhere in the back, A store manager whispered into a headset for security to come escort an officer out. Marcus didn't care. He grabbed a carton of eggs, added them to his basket, and kept moving, an ordinary man finishing his grocery run, leaving behind a lesson Officer Daniels wouldn't soon forget. Marcus knew exactly how these situations went down. He'd spent years training for moments like this, tense standoffs where one wrong word could flip calm to chaos. Except he was usually the one giving the orders, not the one standing in the dairy aisle defending himself from a rookie cops. Ego tripped, he glanced at the faces around him. The mother gripping her son's shoulder so tightly his sleeve bunched up. The older man near the butter section, phone raised high now, no longer pretending to scroll. A pair of teenagers near the frozen pizzas, eyes wide, whispering to each other about how they were definitely posting this. IT had to end now. Marcus kept his movements calm, precise, the same way he'd done in undercover busts, except now his only backup was the truth and a handful of witnesses with shaky camera hands. Slowly, he reached into his back pocket. The moment his hand moved, Danielle's posture snapped rigid, fingers hovering over his holster like he was itching for an excuse to draw. His eyes darted to the shoppers. He saw them, but he didn't care enough to back down. Marcus felt that flicker of anger in his gut, that deep, steady burn that reminded him why he'd joined the bureau in the first place. That he pulled out a slim black wallet, flipped it open with one hand. The gold badge caught the harsh store lights, a sunburst of authority that silenced every whisper in the aisle. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Special Agent Marcus Taylor. Gasps echoed like a wave breaking on the tile floor. The mother with the boy let out a soft, "Oh my God." The older man lowered his phone just enough to mouth FBI at no one in particular. Danielle's face drained of color so fast, it was almost funny, if Marcus was in the mood to laugh. The cocky smirk he'd worn like a shield slid right off, replaced by the pinched, panicked look of a man realizing too late that he'd cornered the wrong target. Special Agent Marcus Taylor, FBI, Marcus said. He didn't need to raise his voice, the badge did the talking for him. But he made sure every syllable landed like a hammer. And unless you have probable cause, you're violating my rights and embarrassing yourself in front of all these nice people. Daniels opened his mouth, then closed it again when no good excuse came out. His fingers twitched near his holster, then fell away like they'd never been there. Whispers turned to murmurs. The teenage boy near the pizzas whispered, "Dude, he's FBI," like he'd just seen a superhero unmask. Marcus took a small step forward, closing the space between them. He wasn't a big man by any means, but power wasn't always in size. Sometimes it was in the way you stood, the way you held your ground while the other guy's knees turned to water. "Let me explain how this works, Officer Daniels," Marcus said, voice still calm but hard as stone. "You don't get to harass citizens without reason. You don't get to single someone out because they don't look like you think they should." Daniels swallowed hard, darting a glance over Marcus's shoulder at the crowd. He looked like he wanted to say something. An apology, maybe, or a protest, but Marcus didn't give him the chance. "Next time you feel the need to play tough guy," Marcus continued, his voice low, "maybe pick someone who doesn't outrank your entire department." That got a tiny laugh from somewhere in the aisle. A quick, sharp bark of surprise from a middle-aged man near the cheese display. Daniels flinched like the sound stung him. "I'm going to finish my shopping now," Marcus said, sliding the wallet back into his pocket with deliberate calm. "You're going to step aside. You're also going to think real hard about whether you still have a job by tomorrow morning. Because trust me, internal affairs will see this." Daniel's mouth opened again. Nothing came out. He stepped back, almost stumbling into a display of organic butter. He shot a desperate look at the handful of shoppers recording every second, but their faces told him exactly what he didn't want to hear. "This is going online tonight." Marcus gave him one last look, not anger, not smugness, just a steady reminder that power works both ways. Then he turned, calm as ever, and pushed his cart down the aisle. He paused long enough to grab a carton of almond milk he'd been eyeing before Daniels showed up. Behind him, the aisle slowly came back to life. The mother and her son moved away. The older man gave Marcus a respectful nod as he passed, and the teenagers were already debating how many views the clip would get by morning. Marcus didn't care about any of that. He cared about finishing his grocery run, and making sure the next time Officer Daniels thought about flexing his badge, he'd remember the day he learned the hard way that not every target is powerless. Marcus stepped forward, closing the gap between him and Officer Daniels until only inches of cold grocery store air stood between them. He made sure his badge stayed visible, the gold letters gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights like a spotlight that couldn't be turned off. When he spoke, his voice was calm but carried enough force to cut through every aisle. There would be no confusion about who was in control now. "You know what's funny, officer?" Marcus said, his eyes locked on Daniels's. "I teach law enforcement officers just like you. I stand in front of classrooms full of rookies and veterans, men and women with a badge, and I remind them what civil rights look like. I remind them that a uniform is not a license to profile innocent people in the frozen foods aisle." "Hey!" Ripple of murmurs moved through the crowd. Phones that had been raised cautiously were now trained steadily on Daniels's flushed, tight face. A teenage boy whispered, "He teaches cops?" to his friend, like Marcus was some myth come to life. Daniels's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. He opened his mouth to salvage whatever authority he had left. "Hey, I was just..." But Marcus cut him off with a simple flick of his hand, a dismissive gesture that shut Daniels down faster than any shouting match ever could. "You were just harassing a shopper," Marcus said, his voice as crisp as the refrigerated air, "because he didn't look like you thought he should. That's called racial profiling. You want a refresher? It's illegal. And you know what makes it worse?" Daniels glanced around like he might find backup somewhere among the rows of yogurt and oat milk. All he saw were witnesses, a mother hugging her son closer, an older man recording openly now, a teenage cashier half hidden behind a display of organic eggs. And every one of them had heard every word. Marcus leaned in just a fraction. "Do you know how many cameras are rolling right now?" Daniels's eyes darted from phone to phone, each one a silent witness. He looked past Marcus and spotted the store manager peeking from behind a shelf of cereal boxes, face pale, headset in hand, frozen in place. Marcus didn't bother to lower his voice. "So here's how this goes. You have two options, Officer Daniels. You apologize, right now, to me and to every shopper you just threatened with that badge. Or I file a report with your precinct. And every second of this ends up on the local news by sunrise. You want to go viral? Be my guest." Daniels's lips parted. He blinked like he might say something clever, something that might salvage even a shred of pride, but the words never formed. The badge on Marcus's hip and the silent jury of witnesses stripped him of any illusion of power. Finally, Daniels's shoulders sagged. His voice cracked on the first word. "I'm sorry, sir." Marcus tilted his head slightly, eyes hard as stone. "Louder, so everyone hears you." Daniels's face went redder than the sale signs above the dairy shelf. He drew in a shaky breath, clenched his jaw, and forced the words out again. "I'm sorry. It wasn't much, but it was enough." The mother with her two kids let out the breath she'd been holding and gave Marcus a grateful nod. The older man lowered his phone and tucked it away, a satisfied look on his face like he'd just filmed an ending no one expected, but everyone wanted to see. A ripple of soft applause broke the silence, hesitant at first, then spreading down the aisle like a warm breeze. The teenage boy who'd been recording with wide eyes clapped the loudest, grin wide as he nudged his friend. Even the store manager finally stepped forward, offering Marcus a respectful nod that said more than words could. Marcus didn't smile. Not yet. He kept his gaze locked on Daniels, letting the moment stretch just long enough to make sure the lesson landed where it needed to. "You're going to remember this, Officer Daniels," Marcus said, his tone quiet but sharp enough to slice through the applause. "Next time you think about using your badge to flex your ego, you'll remember this aisle. These people. This apology." Daniels didn't answer. He didn't have to. The defeat on his face was answer enough. Marcus stepped back, adjusting his shopping basket in his hand like this was just another normal Tuesday errand. "Now, if you'll excuse me," he said, voice finally softening. "I've got groceries to finish. And I think these people have seen enough for one day." He turned away, giving Daniels his back, the final, quiet dismissal. The small crowd parted for him like a tide, heads nodding in respect. The mother mouthed, "Thank you," as he passed. Justice, Marcus thought, served cold, right there in the dairy aisle, between the overpriced yogurt and the organic butter. Sometimes it didn't come from a courtroom or a badge. Sometimes it came from standing your ground when someone in uniform forgot who they were supposed to serve. Marcus didn't drag it out. He knew when to end a confrontation, when to let a lesson settle deep enough to stick. He calmly pulled out his phone and, in one smooth motion, snapped a clear photo of Danielle's badge number. The click of the camera was soft but final. Like a judge's gavel at the end of a trial, Daniels shifted his weight from foot to foot, but he didn't dare say a word. The moment he'd opened his mouth to challenge Marcus, he'd dug his own grave, and now all he could do was stand there while the crowd watched him sweat. Marcus tucked his phone back into his pocket and gave Daniels a thin, measured smile, not one of victory, but of warning. A reminder that this didn't have to happen again, if Daniels learned to do better. Next time, Marcus said, his voice calm but edged with steel, do your job the right way. Protect people. Serve them. Don't bully them because you can. Daniels opened his mouth, maybe to defend himself one last time, but no words came out. He looked down, staring at his shiny boots like they might save him. They didn't. Marcus turned away from him and lifted his hands slightly, addressing the people who'd been brave enough to stand and watch and film, instead of turning away. His voice was steady, loud enough for the manager peeking around. The bread display to hear too. Thank you all for witnessing this, Marcus said. He turned his head, making eye contact with the mother still holding her son's hand, the older man with the phone, the teenagers who looked like they'd just seen a real-life hero. Always film. Always speak up. That's how you hold power. Accountable. That's how you make sure people like him don't get away with this. A wave of nods moved through the aisle. Someone whispered, damn right, under their breath. The mother mouthed, thank you. Marcus didn't linger for applause. He pushed his cart forward, calm as ever, like this was just another Tuesday errand. Which, for him, it really was. He paused near the milk section, grabbed a carton off the shelf, checked the date, and set it in his basket like nothing unusual had happened. Behind him, Daniel stood frozen, badge gleaming, but power gone, surrounded by whispers and the weight of his own mistakes. He'd come in thinking a badge was enough to command respect, but now he knew better. Authority wasn't about who barked the loudest or who had a gun on their hip. It was about trust, and Daniels had thrown that away in front of everyone. Word spread fast. By the time Marcus reached the checkout, the teenage cashier had already heard the whole story secondhand, her wide eyes darting from Marcus's calm face to the aisle behind him where Daniels was nowhere to be seen. She scanned his groceries in stunned silence, then handed him the receipt with a small, nervous smile. Thank you for standing up, she whispered. Marcus gave her a nod. The same nod he'd given witnesses 100 times in 100 different places. Always stand up, he said simply. Then he pushed his cart through the automatic doors, the summer sun spilling onto the polished floor behind him. By the next morning, the video was everywhere, bouncing from phone to phone, retweeted by news anchors, reposted by activists, clipped into reaction videos with bold headlines. Cop Harasses shopper didn't know he was FBI. The views hit millions before lunchtime. Danielle's face and badge number were impossible to hide. The sheriff's department scrambled to do damage control, press statements, promises of retraining, an official note that Daniels had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Marcus didn't care about any of that. He was back at work, wearing a different jacket, in a different neighborhood, blending in so well you'd never guess he was the same man from that viral clip. That was the job, stay quiet when it counted, speak up when it mattered most. People who saw him now had no idea that just yesterday, he'd reminded an entire town what real authority looked like. Not a gun, not a badge, but respect. Integrity. The courage to stand your ground in a grocery aisle when the wrong man tries to push you around. So, the next time someone thinks they're above the law, whether they're wearing a badge or not, they might want to think twice. Because they never know who's watching. They never know who's wearing that hidden badge under an ordinary jacket. And as for the rest of us, Marcus's message was simple: always film, always speak up, always hold power accountable. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true and inspiring tales. Because sometimes, the quietest person in the aisle is the one who reminds us all what justice really looks like.